Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from truly across the continent today for another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're new to us, which many of you are today, including our speaker team, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us in our first 2 weeks to kick off another epic school year. We have had people that have crossed Antarctica on skis. We've had people that have gone to the bottom of every ocean on this planet. We've had a wide variety of some of the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth, and everything we do is on YouTube. So if you want to check out like 3,500 past broadcasts, see my face way too much as a host, you can head there and do just that. Lots to explore and discover with some really spectacular people. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, which I am so, professional detachment aside, I'm so excited for today. Today's going to rock. I want to note we are going to have a Kahoot together. So 4 quick questions between our talk and Q&A. So if you want to play along, test your understanding, have a little bit of fun, you can pull that up, and in about 20 minutes or so, we'll get to that. But today, I'm so excited because we are joined by Dr. Britney Schmidt and the Icefin team. Honestly, if there's a cooler gig on this planet than getting to go to some of the most forbidding and wild and epic landscapes in the world to test out cutting-edge new robotics that you're working on to understand more about climate change and seek out how we're going to explore other worlds in the solar system, I don't know what it is. It's really hard to top that in terms of a job description. I'm very jealous. I'm pinching myself that we even get to do this at all. So without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Schmidt and the Icefin team to take us on a little tour of Icefin and their robotics lab. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, hey guys. Welcome to glorious rainy Ithaca and our lab here at Cornell University. So my name is Britney Schmidt. I'm a professor here, and these are members of the Icefin team.
Francis Bryson.
We are
suddenly all washed out. I'm a robotics engineer here in the lab.
And my name is Daniel Lean, and I'm an electronics engineer here in the lab as well.
So what we're going to do is we are going to introduce you to our friend here, which is Icefin. Hopefully we can get our light levels right in here. We're not exactly in a film studio. We work on robots, not so much on the images under the water makes sense. Maybe not so much above it. But yeah, so this is Icefin. So Icefin, well, this is Icefin's head, kind of. So Icefin is an underwater robotic oceanographer, basically. And so the robot allows us to do lots and lots of different things under the ice. So we'll give you a tour of its head first, and then we'll walk through the rest of the vehicle. So it actually, even hilariously, is upside down from the way we would normally look at it, or the way we normally think about it. So what you can see here on the top now is our most important sensor of all, which is our CTD. So this instrument here is measuring basically how salty the water is. And that's important because if we're going out underneath glaciers, we want to understand how much the glaciers are melting from the hot water in the ocean or the warmer water in the ocean. So this allows us to tell how salty or how fresh the water is. Right beside it is this instrument here that tells us the oxygen content. So basically, that's another way to think about where did this water that we're swimming Icefin come from. We also have cameras because we like to see. We're humans. We like to use our eyes. It's great to see stuff under the ice. We also see using sound. So this up here is a forward-looking sonar. What that allows us to do is to kind of bounce sound waves off of the ice, off of the seafloor, or off of anything around us. And it allows us to actually kind of see in front of the vehicle about 100 meters. And that allows us to see things like the ice wall or the ice roof or the seafloor coming at us before we get there. Where we're operating usually is underneath ice, so there's not a lot of light. So things like lights on the front of the vehicle and sonars that allow us to see in the distance are really, really important. So after that, we've got thrusters. So these guys here, these kind of holes you can see in the side of the vehicle, and we can zoom in even. These are how we get around under the ice. So these are our little impellers. So they've got looks kind of like a little fan in there. So that's actually how we're driving around. And Icefin has a set of these up front and a set of them in the back, and then a rear thruster as well. And we'll show you that in a moment. So these allow us to kind of move the vehicle underneath there. Right behind that Francis is moving kind of into, and Daniel is moving kind of into zoom, we're going to see another sonar instrument. So this is a different sonar. So the one up front helps us with risks. This one actually helps us to map the seafloor. So one of the things that we're really interested in is where is the ice been? Where is the ice been scraping along the seafloor? And so we can actually use this to measure that. We can also flip it up and look at the ice and then measure the shape of the ice. And that allows us to tell a little bit more about how it's been melting. And so then behind that, we've got even more things, but we're going to go around the desk. So forgive me, I hope none of you are seasick. But we're going to go back here and we're going to get a tour of the electronics from none other than Daniel, our electrical engineer, who's going to tell you a bit about the electronics.
Hey, yeah. So this is the brains of Icefin. So everything in here. Actually, I'm going to grab this. Hold on. Since electronics aren't waterproof, when we're actually swimming, we put the electronics in this aluminum tube, which allow it to go to pressure, and it's got 2 waterproof end caps that keep the entire thing watertight. It's a little heavy, so I'm going to put it back down. But inside we have the brains of Icefin and the power. So underneath you can see we have 20 batteries that we use. They're rechargeable, and these are what provide Icefin power to operate the sensors and the thrusters and the computer during a dive. Up front, this big silver box is the main computer that we use on Icefin, and it commands all of the sensors, and it talks to our computers on the surface, letting us see what is happening under the ice, what kind of measurements we're getting from the sensors. And all of the other electronics in here really is about getting data from the outside, from the cameras, from the sonars that Brittany was talking about, and the sensors, and sending those back up to the surface. We use fiber optics, which some of you may be familiar with. It's also used in internet connections. It's basically sending data over light. And so we do that. We send the data back to the surface via a fiber optic connection via light, and then turn that back into electrons on the surface. And then we can plug computers in. We can basically see everything that's going on underneath the surface through that data link. And that's all enabled by what's happening in here.
So Daniel mentioned it, right? So this is what Icefin looks like when it's all put together. So that black tube that's shown right here, this is one of our fancy Icefin stickers. That black tube right there is what contains all of the electronics. So we gave you a tour of the front half of the vehicle all the way back through the science sensors, and then we've got the electronics, and now we're going to see the tail. So right here, what Francis is showing us here is the tail of the vehicle. So in the back of the vehicle, we have some really cool sensors. So we're going to come down and see these guys. So this really awesome one here, this sensor here is what we call a DVL, or a Doppler velocity logger. And one of the things that it lets us do is it pings off of the seafloor or off of the ice and allows us to kind of, as we're going along, it's kind of blipping. And then that tells us how fast Icefin is going, but also how fast the ocean is going around us. So it allows us to tell us how fast the current is going. Behind that, you can see these are lasers, so we can see how big something is, and camera images from this camera here. And we've got a light source back here that illuminates the scene. And then behind that, as I mentioned, we have more thrusters, just like we have in the front, and then our rear-facing thruster. And we even have a backup camera because, as we all know, every good vehicle needs a backup camera. So that's Icefin. So we've got a couple different Icefins here in the lab. And what we do with it is to put it through the ice in hard to reach places to tell us things about the ice itself. And so at this point, I'm going to switch over to our other computer and allow you to see kind of a presentation about Icefin. So this is what Icefin looks like when she's doing her job. She's under the ice here. So this you can kind of tell is sea ice. So if you look at the background there, you can see this kind of green stuff that's coming down from the top. That's actually a brinicle, a big tube of ice formed by cold brine coming down. And the reason it's green is that there's algae actually living inside that ice. So what you'll notice here is that there is actually light coming through the ice. So here's about 4 meters, or about 12, well, actually 16, so about 12 feet of ice, which sounds like a lot of ice, but for Antarctica, 12 feet of ice isn't actually all that much. So Icefin's swimming around underneath here. We got lucky. Someone was diving under there at the time, and got to take a picture of Icefin in action. So here's a video of Icefin kind of swimming in that same environment. If it's going to play. Doesn't look like it's playing for you guys. But hopefully, so sorry about that not playing. I'll try it one more time, see if it'll.
Oh yeah,
there we go. Okay, great. Yeah, so this is Icefin kind of swimming along underneath the ice. So this is what it would look like most of the time. However, lots of the time we put it in places where you really have no chance of being able to observe it. So this team, the group that you've just met, myself, Daniel, and Francis, were out last year. In fact, we left in November of last year and worked with our colleagues in the UK, so from the British Antarctic Survey, but we were hosted by friends from the Norwegian Polar Institute. And so we were actually working on an ice shelf that none of us had ever been to called Fimble Ice Shelf. And so these are some of the pictures of that setup there. So that top picture was just at the end of an evening, as you know, or maybe you've thought about, during the summer in Antarctica, we have 24 hours of light. So this is, you know, about 4 in the morning. It would normally be dark, but because it's Antarctica, we just had a beautiful, beautiful low light. So that's our camp there that we're living in. So you can kind of see this big yellow tent over here that I'm pointing at. That's where Icefin lives. We've got vehicles that we use over here to kind of move things around. And then we all lived in much smaller tents that you can't see here. On the inside of that tent, so here's a picture of Francis with not 1, but 2 Icefin vehicles. So we actually have multiple copies of the vehicle. And that's so if we lose one or one breaks, we can get the other one ready right away. And then outside, we can see this big, huge metal frame here is what we launch the vehicle from. So we kind of like pick it up, lift it, dangle it over its fiber optic tether, and put it down through the ice. There's a couple of shots of us actually working out there, so you can kind of see the process. So on the left, in this left picture, this is us walking the dog, literally. So we're dragging Icefin across the snow in one of these sleds to bring it from the tent where we do all of the checkouts for the vehicle. So we bring it around. So here's me and Daniel. And then there's me, Francis, and Daniel working on the vehicle. So we're getting it all set up here, and then we pick it up. And here you can see it's about halfway into the hole. And this hole is 425 meters deep. So this is taller than the Empire State Building deep. About 1.5 Empire State Buildings is how thick the ice is right here. And so then we dangle the Icefin through there and go out and explore underneath. This is kind of what it looks like for us on the top. Francis and I are really lucky. We get to drive the vehicle. So here we are in our tent. You can see the screen that we're getting all the signals coming back from Icefin. Francis is over here making sure the science sensors are working and making sure our navigation is working well. Just below that, you can see a picture of Daniel in total hero mode, which basically means sitting very, very still for 6 to 8 hours sometimes in the extreme cold, making sure that that little yellow fiber optic tether is going down the hole and coming back up the hole exactly as we plan. And then here's Pete Davis from the British Antarctic Survey once when he was running the controllers on the winch. And this is our colleague Jan from the Norwegian Polar Institute. So we get people to help us. It's an international affair. And here's what it looks like when we get done with a successful mission. Lots of relieved scientists and engineers happy with what the robot just went and did. So it was really fun. We had a great time. And so we were able to do some new science and a new place. So kind of a fun time. So with that, I guess if there's anything else I can show you, let me know. Otherwise, we're happy to take some questions.
Well, I want to begin actually by highlighting why you're doing this. So before we dive in with our questions in our Kahoot, what's the knowledge that you're hoping to gain with this incredible journey and with such a big team?
Yeah, so the exact details of the science depend on where we go. But in this particular place, in Antarctica, what we're really interested in is how much climate change is affecting the ice there. So Icefin's kind of role in this is to get us to places where we can't take data otherwise. So we drive the robot underneath the ice. We can go kilometers from these boreholes and measure places that are really hard to get to. And so all of that data allows us to then really understand why the melting's happening and how it's happening. And so that's primarily what we're doing in Antarctica. But we're also looking at how cracks form and how the seafloor is evolving, at what's living underneath there. And the cool thing about Icefin is that we have all kinds of scientists and engineers working on it. And part of that is also that it's forward looking. So we are trying to teach ourselves how to think about the ice and how to think about the ocean in these places, but also how to explore them. Because it's when you go to a new place, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around how you would even pose questions, and then more importantly, how you would answer them. So that's one of the things that we're doing here is we're developing kind of the ways to think about driving around under the ice, the ways we might do that in the future. And so our long-term interest is that we're fascinated by planets that are a lot like ours, but have these kind of huge ice shells on the outside and oceans underneath, like Jupiter's moon, Europa. And so that development that we're doing there is forward-looking so that we can practice here on Earth and develop new tools to then one day take these things to other planets. So part of my job is that I'm a member of the Europa Clipper science team. So Europa Clipper is the first Europa mission. There have been a couple missions to Jupiter, but this is the first one going and targeting Europa, and we're launching on October 10th. So stay tuned for some really cool science coming from that.
We've got, I think, 3 other programs in October alone talking about Europa Clipper. It's a thing we featured for almost, like, I think 6-7 years here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, or we've been talking about this and getting the stage for it. How exciting must it be to have this mission like 2 weeks away after working on it for so long? Your face says it all.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I have been working on it since I was a graduate student, so that's terrifyingly long at this point in time. But it's, so most of my scientific career, I've been trying to get to Europa. So still trying to get there, but getting a lot closer when we leave the planet with Europa Clipper.
So, Brittany, before we dive in with our Kahoot, which I want to lead off with before we do the bigger Q&A, I want to ask a question that I think we're going to get no matter what, which is, how do you get a hole in the ice that's taller than the Empire, or that, like, any of this? What are you doing to make that hole?
We work with really cool people that have really fancy hoses. So our colleagues at the British Antarctic Survey are like the world's experts in what's called hot water drilling. And so what it kind of is like taking a fire hose. We, depending on which program you're involved in, we have personally shoveled a whole bunch of snow into these things, or if you're lucky and you have a tractor, you can dump a whole bunch of snow in, but we melt huge, basically pools of snow, and then heat up that water, and then we use that to actually melt through the ice. That's actually why Icefin is shaped like this. If you were to look at most underwater vehicles, they're shaped kind of like this, right? They're kind of fat. Icefin is really long and thin, which is annoying to engineer because it's very hard to make it float flat. But that's what allows us to actually fit through these holes in the ice. Is the bigger the vehicle or the wider the vehicle is, the more fuel you have to use to build to bore these holes. And so Icefin is 9¼ inches wide, or about 23 centimeters wide. And it's like that because the holes that these things are drilling are, on the order of 12 inches or 35 to 40 centimeters wide. So it needs to be long and narrow in order to do that. But it's the same thing we would do if we went to Europa one day. We would put a melter on the front of the vehicle, and then that would be the same thing. The more narrow the vehicle, the better you are at melting.
I love that you called them really cool people with really fancy hoses. Thank you. That actually makes my day, just as a phrase. So actually, I have one more follow-up question, because we've actually never covered this in any of our Europa Clipper things, and I want to make sure we get it today. Are you working on an Icefin 2.0 with a melter on the front, like something where you could drill this sort of hole, or is this top secret?
Yeah, no, we are amongst many teams that are working on concepts for that. So in fact, Francis and I worked on a concept called Verne, like as of Jules Verne, that was looking at what we would do. And in fact, we're going up to Greenland starting in March. And part of the work that we're doing in Greenland is to take Icefin and take some of these really cool instruments that people in the lab have developed, like microscopes, water samplers. And in fact, we're developing what's called a mass spectrometer, which is a way of taking in material and measuring its chemistry in detail. And these are the kinds of measurements that we want to make one day underneath the ice on Europa. And so what we're doing is we're kind of building sample handling systems, some of which will be on the vehicle, some of which will be on this kind of station that we're putting into the ice. But it's a step towards what we'd like to do one day when we go to Europa. And so that's probably like some decades off. Of course, call your congressman and maybe it'll come closer. But that's the kind of thing that we'd really like to do, is to be able to melt into the ice and work on that. So, and some of our friends are working on the melter part. For instance, friends of ours at Honeybee Robotics out in California. So there's a lot of people working on all the pieces of the project. And then how we can do the best science here while we're waiting for the opportunity to send it there.
Well, you certainly have the polar and engineering expertise at this point, but the fact that you call it Vern, actually, you should just deserve the contract just for that, because that's just a fantastic title, and I'll explain it to our kids later. We're going to dive into a little 4-question quiz. Now, the role of this quiz is to, again, test some understanding, have a little bit of fun, reinforce some concepts. So if you want to help us out with some answers as we go along in the Kahoot, you're welcome to chime in with little hints. And what I think our kids will win in this Kahoot is our everlasting respect. So that is what's up for grabs today in this quiz. And then we're going to go live with a Q&A. Mr. Hancock's class, you guys are going to be first. Miss Ward after that. YouTubers, please do chime in as well. But let's get underway to learn a little bit more about Dr. Schmidt's work and where we might be going with Europa Clipper. All right. If you've never seen Kahoot before, by the way, Brittany, it's the faster you answer, the more points you get.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. And I don't think any are going to stump you. I think you'll be good for this, but if they do, all the better. We like stumping the scientists. All right, Antarctica is the what continent? Choose all that apply. Highest, driest, windiest, coldest. It's certainly an interesting place to do field work. What do we think? And it's more than one answer. It might be all 4. It might be just a couple. But we're driving home the point that it is challenging to get there and to work there. What's our answer, everybody? Yes. So all of you said coldest, but almost no one got the others. It is all of those things. Antarctica is crazy. Brittany, can you explain a little bit about what it's like to even get to Antarctica and these places you're going to? Like, it's not just a hop, skip, and a jump, is it?
Yeah, no, certainly not. So it is both. It depends on where you are. Where we're working is not the highest part of the continent, but in fact, there's 5 kilometers of ice. And so many miles of ice. So that makes it actually really, really high. The South Pole, for example, people get pretty serious elevation sickness just going to South Pole because it's so high. It's incredibly dry, it's incredibly windy, it's incredibly cold. And in fact, it's the wind that is one of the biggest things that we fight. So we have to put on these just massive jackets. In fact, I don't know if we have one, I'll try to find one. But they are just huge. And right, we're wearing these big giant things to keep ourselves warm and keep ourselves, basically keep the environment out. So I should have thought about, I have this great video of me opening a door in Antarctica and then my hair doing this.
For what it's worth, for our classes, we did a program with someone who walked across Greenland and experienced some pretty epic winds on her route to go down to the South Pole soon. So we've seen that before. I love that we're doing a live jacket hunt. It's the first, yes, look at that.
Well,
boot.
we found a boot. So as you can see, these are pretty normal size boots. Just kidding. But like, there's my whole arm in this boot, right? So these are incredibly huge. They're protecting us from the environment. So these things are rated to minus 150, right? Wow. So they are keeping the ice from conducting into your feet. They're keeping the wind from being able to blow across your legs and cool them off. They're super, super insulated. There's actually these like big insulated boots on the inside of them, if I can get it out of the boot. And it's kind of crazy. Let's see. It's a lot of work. You can kind of see it there, so I won't pull it all the way out. Yeah. But these are actually keeping all of the heat in there. And so a lot of what we do is we eat irresponsibly, but it's actually the responsible thing to do. So you eat as much chocolate as you can possibly eat to try to keep yourself actually staying warm while you're there.
I was saying to our Greenland explorer earlier that Snickers bars are the unifying factor between every single polar explorer I've ever run across. So I'm so glad you mentioned the chocolate bit. You're also the first person ever to mention, I did not know this, and I've studied a lot of Antarctic stuff, that people get altitude sickness at the South Pole. That is fascinating. Yep. Very, very cool. Yep. Well, we are going to go to question 2. Witty Tiger is in our lead going into the next round. So let's see. Brittany and her team head to Antarctica to test out what? I hope you all get this. Robots, balloons, space lasers, or new tourist trail locations. Now, tourists can go to Antarctica, but probably not where Dr. Schmidt's team is going. And I will say that the other options here are things that are done in Antarctica It's just not necessarily what the Icefin team is doing. We got them all on it in this picture. Yes, it is robots. I like that some of you thought space lasers, though. That is awesome. And we have another broadcast on that if you're ever keen. But Icefin, cool robotics. All right. We're going to go on to Europa as a theme now for our final two questions before we do our Q&A. So Europa is a moon of which planet? We talked about this at the beginning. Who is listening? It also may be in the picture if you know your planets. Is it Saturn, Mars, Mercury, or Jupiter? Such a pretty planet, and it's such a pretty moon. I've got to say, like, as a solar system aficionado, Europa is really gorgeous. Do you have a tattoo? Oh, I'll bring that up when the moment we go get the question. Yes, it is Jupiter. Oh, we tripped up a few of you in this one. Nice try. So yeah, Jupiter's our answer. Let's see the Europa tattoo. I'm so excited. Holy.
Yeah, so these are observations of Galileo's. And so Galileo built the first telescope, did some crazy stuff with it, looked at the moon and recognized it was a planet for the first time, told us all about nebulas, and then it pointed it at the Jupiter system and saw these little points of light going around Jupiter every night. No one knew how to explain it. So literally have it tattooed to my wrist. It means that we are not the center of the universe. In fact, that's what it told us. At the time he lived, we thought that the Earth was the center of everything. So yeah, so kind of my favorite Jupiter fact, actually.
You keep adding to your cool factor as we go along. Now, before this broadcast, and I'll send this to all our classes, I found this fantastic profile with some great Q&A with Dr. Schmidt. And the only thing she had that wasn't cool is that she's a Yankees fan, and as a Blue Jays fan, that's a real shame. But other than that, you are really got some cool stuff going on. So let's see what that does to our leaderboard.
Still AL East. Still AL East. It'll be okay.
That's fine. Yeah. Europa Clipper leaves in 2 weeks. How long will it take to reach the moon? And by the moon, I mean Europa. Sorry. 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years. How long does it take to get to Jupiter with like our fastest rocket ship? I'm so happy to get this question in because I love people's answers. Let's see what we get. Got full class. Ooh, a lot of people thought 6 months. 6 years is the correct answer. We leave in 2 weeks and we get there in 2030. So our grade 5 kids today, you're going to be in grade 11 by the time it gets there, which is insane. And we're going to cover more about that in a minute, maybe in the Q&A, but I want to see what this does to our leaderboard, our podium finish before we head to Mr. Hancock in Georgetown for our first question. Woody Tigers in third. All right, Mystery Crabs in second, which is for some reason a brain with sunglasses. And number 1 for all the marbles is Rockstar Crab. Way to go, guys. If you are any of these folks, let us know you are in the chat. You've seen your first Kahoot Icefin team. There you go. I'm going to head to Mr. Hancock's class to take us away with a question. And come on in, guys.
Hey, just a couple Rockstar Crabs here who have a question. One of the students in grade 4 here was wondering, how does Icefin not freeze and just kind of freeze up when it goes under when it's so cold?
Nice.
Well, actually, one of the things that we deal with the most, ironically, is how to get heat out of the robot. So on the surface is very, very cold, right? It can be minus 30 when we're down there, maybe even colder. So we actually do have some ice that'll happen in and around the sensors. But the ocean is relatively warm. And so the ocean is about, well, it's minus 2, but it's basically the temperature that liquid water should be at this environment, salty water. And so actually what we can do is we can just put the robot into the water and any ice that's formed on the outside will actually warm up. But one of the hardest things that we actually do is try to get rid of heat. You know, as you might know, if you put your hands on your computer, right, they heat up. So inside these electronics, one of the hardest things to do is to get rid of the heat created there. And so we can come pretty close to boiling stuff on the inside of this vehicle when it's been operating for a few hours.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for that. What a cool first question, guys. Miss Ward, I want to note if you guys want to flick on your mic. Oh, I can come in and check and see if we got a question. Hello, folks. Welcome in.
Hey.
Oh my God.
How's it going?
We met in Antarctica.
Yes.
Of course. Naturally.
Of course.
Nice to see you.
You too. You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
We were wondering what's your scariest moment in the field?
Ooh, we probably all have different ones. Daniel, what's your favorite or favorite?
I would say, I mean, I've only had one field season, so I have a relatively limited experience. But this past season, we did have a moment where the fiber optic tether that we use to communicate with the vehicle got tangled underneath the ice. And so I was out there. This was probably a few hours into the dive, and the vehicle was swimming back towards the hole. So part of my job is to make sure that there's not too much of the tether under the water. So we were kind of winching some back up. We have this like really big reel that we can kind of spool the tether onto or spool it off. And coming out of the darkness of the hole, there's just this huge knot. And so, we have to stop everything. We have to make sure we don't like suck the knot up into the winch, because that would cause all kinds of problems. And it took us probably 20 or 30 minutes to untangle this knot in the middle of the night. It was quite cold, and we had to take your gloves off because you're untying things. And so that was definitely very stressful. But we were able to figure it out and finish the dive, which was great. So we solved the problem, but it was definitely pretty scary.
That would be way up on my list. If you've ever untangled a necklace, right? Like you put down a necklace, or you put down like a chain that you really care about, and you give it 3 seconds by itself, right? It just ties itself into an infinite knot that you can't get out of. So the fiber optic tether under the ice really likes to terrify us, I would say. Francis, do you want to
mine is also with the fiber, but a different situation. I think on the same dive.
It was.
Same dive.
As we were pulling back, got wrapped around the vehicle. And if it gets wrapped around the vehicle, we don't really know if we can pull it back up the hole. So that was pretty terrifying. We got it. Some excellent driving got it unstuck.
Thank you. I was very proud of that moment.
Yep.
Our other one is that I was out in a pretty bad storm. But that's the kind you'd probably hear. So where we've got like 80 knots of wind and the piston buoy won't move forward. And so then the question is it safer to stop, or is it safer to keep going? And so you kind of learn how to deal with those conditions out there.
Yeah. The challenge of the environment is something that we hear a lot about when it comes to Antarctic exploration, because if you're in a totally casual place and it's 2 feet of ice that you're through and something gets tangled, you reach down, you untangle it. But when you've got 1,000+ feet, there's no recourse. Like, you need to figure out that and work that problem with a incredibly expensive tool in an incredibly forbidding environment. Like, it presents very,
Yep.
We have a nice question, actually, to follow up to this is, how long did it take to develop Icefin, and how expensive is it, if you're willing to share?
Sure, and it depends on which version. But yeah, so we started building Icefin started building it in 2020, kind of late 2013, early 2014. So that was the first version, and it was terrible. But the idea for Icefin goes back to, I started doing under ice kind of or Antarctic work in 2010, and it was really in 2011 that I started thinking about what we would want to do. And then we started with a different project, building a different robot, and this one is kind of a response to what I think we needed to do with that first project. And so so it's been a long time. So depending on how long you're tracking it, it's been at least 10 years, and I've been thinking about it for much longer than that. So, yeah. And different people. So, Francis, you've been involved since 2018. Yeah, it's 2018. Daniel just joined the team, but Matt and I, Matt, who's our lead engineer, so Daniel's been with us a little over a year. So we've been on it since we started in 2014. So a lot of different times.
I'm really glad we got that question, because I think when I was a student, certainly I thought, you get on a project and you do that for 6 months, then you're on a new project and you're constantly changing over. And projects can take decades, especially when it comes to high-level robotics, space exploration. Like, these are things that people commit careers to, and end up bring a whole new generation of people that come in and take over that project for future. So if you're obsessed with an idea or a topic or a project, you can end up doing that for a very long time and working with collaborators from all around the world to do some really cutting-edge science, which is something that's very
And this is version 5, right? We're actually building version 5 right now. So the one we gave you a tour of is version 4. So we're working on version 5 now. So we've had many different versions of it. We get better at over time. And your point there about you can work on these things for a long time, or you can work on them for relatively short times. We have students that'll join us and work on one part of the system. Like, one of them helped design some power systems. Someone's done a fan, Those could be 6 months or a year projects. And then there are people who do their PhDs with us. And there's me, and I apparently am never going to leave. So it's just very long. And we've had a lot of different types of people: electrical engineers, robotics engineers, mechanical, biologists, geologists, oceanographers. Me, I just science of whatever kind, as long as it involves the ice and sometimes salt. So there's a lot of different types of people that we get to work with on this project too.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much for this, guys. This is a great Q&A. We're going to go back to our live classes. We took a few from YouTube. So Mr. Hancock, we're heading back to you. Come on in. Take us away.
Perfect. You mentioned that you had been thinking about this idea for a very long time. Where did the idea come from? Did it involve bumping your head like the flux capacitor? Where did it come from?
No, I'd say it's a slow burn. So I started thinking about how to work on Europa basically when I was an undergrad. But I've been fascinated with the ocean, and in fact specifically with submarines since I was really little. And so I remember being back to this whole Verne, right? Jules Verne wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right? So I was really excited about submarines because I thought they all had windows. And when I found out that submarines don't have windows, I thought it was the hugest waste, right? This is a complete disaster. What are people doing? And then, so I just remember that vividly from being a kid. And then when I started work on Europa, it was like, what are the things we're going to need to answer? What are the things we're going to need to explore? And then I started going to Antarctica in 2010, and that really kind of crystallized it. We started working with people that were working with different types of projects. Icefin is kind of inspired by two different types of vehicles, these very small ROVs that people were using to look at the seafloor in places that were just slightly deeper than where divers could reach, but where we still needed data about the organisms that were living down there under the sea ice. And at the same time, there's all of this oceanography and all of this powerful data that's gathered by autonomous vehicles in the ocean or by giant ocean ROVs. But we need that information from these places under the ice as well in order to understand it. And so I was really inspired to try to work on those problems at the same time, and was obsessed with the idea of getting to what's called the grounding line. So the grounding line is where kind of a glacier kind of flies or slides off of Antarctica and hits the water. So it's got a place where the seafloor is coming up, the glacier is coming off of the continent, and then that wedge here is filled with water. And that is a place where until really kind of we started working on a few other people, but really that's what Icefin was designed for, was to get us ocean data in these places is where the melting really starts and where the glaciers are potentially unstable. And so those problems, how to get through thick ice and measure anything at all, and how to get through specifically near the grounding line. So one's a Europa problem, one's an exploration problem in general, and the other's very much earth science and how do we understand our climate. So that's kind of where it all came from. And so it's, a combination of listening to lots of people, seeing different approaches, and then getting a team of people together. It was just like, we should go do this, and I have an idea how, but I'm not a robotics engineer. I've become someone that knows a lot about these things. I'd always been involved in developing spacecraft, so I can think about, how to put a system together, how to answer a question, how to explore. But you need a whole bunch of people working together to get it right. And so that's what we've done over time.
What a thoughtful and beautiful answer. Thank you, Dr. Schmidt. We're going to head back to your Antarctica buddy for one final question, because time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts. So, Ms. Ward, come on in and unmute and take us away. Hey.
So we were wondering how much a scientist like you gets paid.
Oh, it depends on the person. Let's see. I'll go through the scales of various jobs that people will have made. So let's see. As a graduate student nowadays, you're probably making somewhere between $25,000 and $40,000 a year. As a postdoc you're probably making in the 50 to 70 or 80 kind of K a year. If you're a research scientist, or an engineer, you're in the 80 to 150K. If you're a faculty member, you're kind of in that same range or a little bit higher. And so it kind of really varies depending on who's on your time you've had on the project, on what institution, what kind of institution you're working at. So it's all kind of that. And all of our funding comes from a mix of places. So the university pays for some of this. So the university bought us this awesome lab and kind of furnished it. We bring in grants, and the grants pay for Icefin. It pays for the salaries for our engineering team and our graduate students. and then for our trips to go there. And then we worked with a couple of private foundations as well. So we've worked with NASA and NSF. We've worked with international agencies, like I mentioned, the National Environmental Research Council, the UK, the Antarctica, New Zealand funds the work that we've done with colleagues in New Zealand, and the Marsden Foundation. We've worked with the Norwegian Polar Institute. And so it's kind of all coming from a lot of different places. So yeah.
It's a great answer. And it's not, I love when we get this question because it's basically only high schoolers and above that ever are willing to ask that. So thank you for that. I mean, one thing that I like to highlight is that when you're in grade 6 or grade 10, the thought of finishing high school and then getting an undergrad and a master's and a PhD and then postdoc, etc., it seems like a daunting amount of school. But throughout that entire process and at the end of that, you get to work with the coolest people in amazing labs in incredible places, and you get paid really well for it. So it's not for everybody, but it's a pretty great thing when you can get it and if you're keen. So
you know what, we all have a ton of education. We'd make a whole lot more money if we were in finance or in banking or in really lots of other fields, but it wouldn't come with sweet trips to Antarctica and getting to think about space all the time. So it doesn't always feel like a job. Sometimes it's a job, but when you're answering emails, it's a job. But when you're getting to really do this fun stuff, it really doesn't feel like one.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment very, very much. And I'm sure our classes of all ages today feel the same way. Before we wrap up, is there any final message you want to share with our classes about the work that you do, Icefin, Europa Clipper, anything to leave us off with before we bring them in to say thank you and farewell?
Oh, well, we've got a little, I guess we can give Icefin's going to sing to you.
What?
So one of the fun additions that we've made. So Francis is going to turn it on. So, did you guys hear the song?
Just very faintly, but it's great.
All right, let's try it again. So, awesome. For anyone there, you've just been rickrolled.
Yeah. The first time that's ever happened in the history of exploring by the seat of your pants. So of course, that's how it has to end. Dr. Schmidt, Francis, Daniel, thank you so much for your time, passion, everything today. We're going to bring in our class to say thank you and farewell. Stick around for a quick second after we're done. But Mr. Hancock, Ms. Ward, thank you both so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And bye for now. See y'all.